We are talking about consumer journeys, and now I'm Sandeep Milar. I lead the Visa Advertising Solutions unit.
And I'm Dave Smith at Pandora. I head up Monetization and Yield. So I've got all of our audience assets and the pricing and yield around our inventory assets.
Right. So we spent a good amount of time with a bunch of brands, advertisers, agencies, platforms, and publishers as well, talking about how do you use data and in what context, and then starting from insights, understanding your customer, moving into reaching your best customer or lapsed customer, going into measuring how effective was your campaign, and to kind of wrap it all up, as you were saying before to me, in terms of like privacy. How do you do it in a privacy compliant way? I think this is a really good set of discussion around the room. What did you think about that?
I agree. I thought it was really interesting. I thought one of the things I enjoyed the most was the diversity of perspectives.
Yeah.
So there were some interesting brands in the room. There were agencies in the room. There were data providers in the room. I'm a publisher. There were a couple of other publishers there. And I think we all have a different perspective on a lot of the topics, particularly measurement, for example, where, I think the brands are maybe a little frustrated by the way the ecosystem has adopted measurement, and that perhaps it's not getting really at their business objectives as well as they'd like.
No, I think that's one of the key takeaways that I had in terms of I think brands are struggling in terms of making sense for how do I measure business objectives. I think one of the person in the room was talking about, I try and get to the metrics of business objectives.
Right.
They are trying.
Yep.
That's not where they start.
Right.
Which is, if I were a business, I would hope that if I'm selling tacos, that people bought tacos.
Right. But I think it's hard for everybody in the ecosystem if what you care about is how much revenue did you make selling tacos, but it's very hard to link that back to the ad exposure. So the whole ecosystem is working on this problem of how do I bridge the exposure to an ad to the actual taco purchase, and that's where some of these intermediate metrics of from the click to the brand awareness study, to the location study, to the sales lift study. How do those different metrics fit together, and how do you put together sort of an overall perspective on that consumer journey?
Yeah, I think one of the key points that the lady at the back was talking about consumer profile and understanding, can somebody tell me the consumer journey, not in terms of data points, but in terms of English, in terms of words that can describe that this person that I'm trying to reach has a tendency to search this way, goes on posts on Facebook this way, is making these purchases in these specific frequencies. I think she was looking for one specific solve for that, but I don't know if that exists.
Well, and I think we heard that theme in a couple of different places where people were looking for what's behind the metric. How do I understand what this really means? And they're looking for sense making, not just data representation. And I don't know how we get to. I mean, that I think is still a gap in the industry. I don't think there's anybody that has a good solution yet that effectively, I'm going to use the word mines, but that sort of limits the idea, mines the data to really understand what's the story, what is it in this that's really important. Is it that I'm targeting the right person, I'm targeting the wrong person, I'm targeting them in the right place, I'm targeting them in the wrong place, I'm targeting them at the right time or the wrong time. There's data on all of those issues, but I don't think any one platform is sort of bringing that holistic story together yet.
Yeah, and I think one other missing point that we had is who's supposed to do all of this?
Right.
Because
exactly.
all of us bring
and who's going to pay for it?
Exactly. Right. All of us bring our own piece. Who's going to solve this puzzle?
Exactly.
I look at this as different pieces of the puzzle, whether it's transaction data, whether it's location data, whether it's behavioral data, whether it's converge on
or even back into my publisher environment, whether it's delivery data and engagement data. How did the listener in my case engage with this creative?
Right. And I think it's both brands and advertisers, and there might be certain companies who should be looking at these different data sets as context providers. You've got to look at the data in the context of where it's coming from and what they're doing, versus trying to ask all the questions of this data source, ask all the questions of this data source. You've got to ask the right questions of the right data source.